Another aphorism that I thought of was, faith and belief are shed like a serpent's skin once you know. And this one came rather spontaneously in relationship to the development of the relationship with my parents and I and my children, being that we had been estranged, and in our estrangement they had sunk their roots deep into their Christian faith. And in their sinking deep into their faith, and our conversations, because I've always been a person that has these multiple and various perspectives come up, and they raise questions, and I ask. And in relationship to our development together through the hard times and the good, they could get very staunch and stiff-necked with their decisions that they say they based on their faith, but they didn't treat me as someone who was believing. They treated me as someone who knew beyond any shadow of a doubt. And what was to be right, what was right and what was wrong, and that kind of thing. And when I said it, they were taken back somewhat. But you see, when somebody's been threatened enough times, they can hide their disconcertedness very well. But luckily I have lived with them for a while and grew up with them and know them pretty well to be able to recognize some of their more secreted responses. But the point to it was that faith and belief have its own posture and stance in relationship to life, which is very different from knowledge and knowing. And when it comes down to trying to regulate and moderate your life through brute force and strategy, it requires a posture and stance of complete and utter acceptance. And some people can only accept things through hard facts and knowledge. And there are others that understand this posture and stance of faith and belief as different than hard facts and knowledge, empiricism. One of my aphorisms early on was, the only character that arises is the one that's lacking and or in need of development. And the reason I brought this up was that it was out of necessity, because my identity rooted in relationships had been uprooted from those relationships, and I was reading some books about, behaviorism, why do we behave the way we behave, psychology and sociology, the social imprint, when we're children, we do as we are instructed to do, as we learn to do. We don't necessarily allow these behaviors to develop of themselves. And in fact, it can be very, very productive by training people to behave a certain way. But there is a loss of the sense of self in that just blindly taking on behaviors that are not naturally born of our own experience. And so in the aphorism, the only character that arises is the one that's lacking and in need of development. Is I needed to share that with my family to try to plant the seed that there is a process of development, and that this process of development in many ways is beyond value judgments as to whether they are right or wrong. And that seeing someone from a terrible upbringing rise high above it to become a great individual is not an exception to that rule, but proves the rule. That we, if we allow ourselves to just have our own responses and develop our own selves, we can tap into behaviors that are very productive, that are not born of being instilled in us and instructed and even having brute force placed in us. Talking about this really broadens my perspective with that elder that I know that was spent so much time in the prison system. You see, the way I look at it is that we construct our lives in such a way as to support our own way of identifying with it, our own stance and posture, to affirm our own identity, our own perspective, our own life experiences and everything. And so we can go and live out our entire life in these relationships that bolster our identity and the way we identify things, the way we categorize things, the way we value things, and never come in contact with what really is. It's really interesting to me that I can see all these things and understand them, be able to share them coherently, and drive the point home so that it's understood by others. But the risk in doing so is that you shatter a person's life if you don't do it just right, They've got to come to it by their own terms, their own experience. So the way you present these things is crucial. And what I've realized with my family, I realized it early on that, they didn't understand. They were under the gun. They were doing the best they could with what they had. I gave them all the benefit of the doubt and all that. It's not about judging them. It was all inspired by my love for them. But you have to give it to them piecemeal, piecemeal, piecemeal. And that there's so many experiences in life that are beyond our control that you really just have to take it on faith and believe that they will come to terms with it, or accept that the conditions of their life will not foster that coming to awareness. Or the conditions of life might.